Good morning, everyone. I'm John O'Loughlin, and welcome to my channel. It's called McDuff_2020, and we're wrapping up the year. Today, it's the 31st day of December 2020. I'm not sure if I'm going to have to change my my name of the show to McDuff_2021 or not, but I am expanding our reach here by joining BitChute as many of you have advised, and it's been a secret project carried on mostly by Jumping Mouse, the wonderful Catherine, who assists me with everything. And so she's been working behind the scenes to start building up a population of McDuff shows on BitChute. And you can visit there at McDuff Uncensored is the name of the BitChute site. So we're going to be uploading, hopefully as a practice, to BitChute every day, just in case what happens happens. And I'm sure you know what I mean. Well, I want to just say one thing about the attacks on George Webb and Neighborhood News Studio, formerly Neighborhood News Hour, and then Neighborhood News Media, and within 4 hours it was taken down. So it looks as though YouTube does not want to hear anything from George Webb and the Neighborhood News Studio gang, Addy Ads, Aaron Adler, Mark, and so many I don't know everyone's name. Or perhaps it's the story about what happened to Amber Connor's family in Atlanta, where her house was shot up, and the only people covering it was Neighborhood News Studio and Addie Attikin. Oh, sorry about that. So Addie Attikin has been out there doing the work with George Webb, and there's stuff they're doing that simply is not acceptable to the gods of Google. Google, of course, owns YouTube. So before I began my show this morning, and I just wanted to make some suggestions to you. First of all, downloading shows with the idea of archiving them for the future is one thing. And I want everyone that has the time to do it to please do it. You'd be amazed how simple it is. You can just go and find a YouTube downloader, and some of them are free. Some of them you pay a little bit, but you get it. It works easier, and then you can just download it onto your hard drive or wherever you want to keep it. Download it to the cloud. But this is the second the second stage that I'm thinking of that can help a lot, and that is if you will then start your own channel, maybe on BitChute, maybe on Periscope, maybe somewhere else, maybe anywhere that you think is worth a shot. But start a channel and just start republishing everything that George Webb and Addie and them do. Include my shows if you want to. But I think that, I'm in less danger because I'm more of a background historical person. I'm not out there, knocking on doors and walking past armed guards like Addie Attikin does, or George Webb, for instance, who goes right into the neighborhoods and knocks on doors. No, but it's those guys, the frontline guys, that need our help and our support. They both have Patreons, and you can help in that way. But also, just think about how much time it really would take for you to download the show and then republish it on your own channel. Well, then, YouTube won't be able to get it down, because then all you need to do is to share, hey, I've got this one up over here, under the secret name of, XYZ or something. Be a little bit stealthy, but have a plan. Don't feel powerless. In other words, if you have the time, if you've got a little bit of interest in how this stuff works, trust me, I didn't know how to do it when I started my show, and so it can't be that hard. So that's my suggestion. Okay. The bird is staring at you. It's throwing you off. Which bird? Oh, the bluebird. You can't complain about bluebirds. Bluebirds are a rare sight, and you should feel blessed, because the bluebird is a harbinger of spring, and things always get better in the springtime, right? So maybe it means that we will have 4 more years of President Trump. And over on the other side there is the robin, and robin is another great harbinger of spring, but they both have red breasts, don't they? So there you go. They are. No, the robin does not look like. Oh, you guys are cruel. You are just plain cruel. Now they've come out. They've come out. I mean, bluebirds. They don't just visit anybody. Trust me, okay? So, all right. I see what you mean. He's kind of staring at you, isn't he? All right, shut up, John. Let's do the content of the show, but do consider becoming a warrior, in a sense that you're going to, in your own way, preserve this material and be ready to upload it, or just go ahead and upload it to a separate channel on some other platform, and then the word will get out that, hey, you can see it over here. And you start your own channel. It's so easy. You have an email address. You sign up, and it's very, very easy. And you don't have to even identify yourself on the channel. Just be anonymous. Okay, so that's my idea for this morning. Happy New Year, everyone. Happy New Year, Corky and Mobster, Jacqueline, Linda, ECAT. Yeah, hello, everybody. Well, here's my content this morning. Is my third in my series of EIR reviews. And the theory behind this is they did an awful lot of work to study and, well, I've got some static. They've done an awful lot of work over 30 years. Well, it must be 40 by now. And they write articles in this publication called EIR, or Executive Intelligence Review. And it is just a gold mine of information. It's history that you won't ever read anywhere else. So right now, our country is plagued with an opiate problem. It's an assault on our country that is very reminiscent of the opium assault on China by Great Britain in the 1800s. The Opium Wars and the forcing of China not only to accept the opium, but forcing people, literally at gunpoint, to smoke it and thereby become addicted to it. And so that became a wonderful source of cash for the interests behind the British East India Company and other trading companies associated with the oligarchs, the British upper classes that earn their money as courtiers for the royalty, and through their secret societies have traditionally been running the opium business. So if you compare what they did to China to what's happening to the United States today, then is it not logical to suspect that perhaps it is once again the oligarchs of Great Britain, the ones that have secret money hidden everywhere and run the banks through the City of London and those financial institutions that date back hundreds of years, through middlemen, through cutouts, through legitimizing what was for many years a much looked down upon trade, a something that you wouldn't want to get caught doing. To now they're pushing and pushing and pushing to the point where they're just selling it anyway, no matter whether it's legal or not. So it's very relevant to look back into the roots of what we've been studying. And so we've gotten through the Lucky Luciano and Sicily and Don Calogero and all of the Italian mafia that was re-energized by by the OSS and the U.S. Um, agents such as Angleton. That re-energized dope trade was used to buy the drugs, to buy the guns for the mafia to control territories and run parts of Italy like a feudal empire. All of this so that the drug trade could continue to the benefit of the CIA, which was doing its projects regardless of whether Congress or the president wanted them to or not, because literally they were answerable not really to the president or the National Security Council, but really to the Rockefeller family, because that is who the Dulles brothers' clients are, the J.P. Morgans and the Wall Street banks that create these cartels to suck money out of the general public, worse than P.T. Barnum ever dreamed of. Sucker is born every minute. No, an addict is made every minute, or even every second at this point. All right, so I'm going to put this up on the screen just so that if you ever want to study it, you can have it there. Sorry. There you go. And make it a little bit bigger. Gambling, a timeline. The corporations on the left there are part of a list of corporations involved in the gambling business. But I just wanted to go through the timeline. 1919 to 31 was prohibition. 1931, the Hoover Dam construction. Ironically, the water and hydroelectric power from the Hoover Dam makes the growth of Las Vegas possible. Isn't that interesting? 1941, the opening of the El Rancho Vegas on the Strip and the El Cortez Hotel downtown. 1942, Last Frontier Hotel opens. 1946, Bugsy Siegel opens the Flamingo Hotel. And the state of Nevada levies the first gaming taxes. Now think about how significant the taxes part of that is. This is the beginning with Bugsy Siegel and cutting in the state of Nevada with what they call a tax. 1959, the Nevada Gaming Commission is created by the state legislature. 1964, the New Hampshire State Lottery. 1965, Caesar's World is built. 1966, Howard Hughes arrives to live at the Desert Inn. Robert Mayhew, our friend from many shows, handled the purchase from Mo Dalitz and Friends. Hughes would eventually own 7 casinos in Vegas. 1967, Nevada allows publicly traded corporations to obtain gambling licenses. Wasn't that convenient? 1968, Mary Carter Paint Company becomes Resorts International. The Circus, so named because of the live circus it contains, opens. 1969, New Jersey voters approve a lottery. The first ticket is sold in 1970. 1970s Royal Commission on Gambling in the UK, chaired by Lord Victor Rothschild. 1970, Hughes is moved to Paradise Island. That's the gambling resort in the Bahamas. Lansky's gambling referendum is defeated in Miami Beach, 1970. 1972, Meshulam Riklis and Ted Arison found Carnival Cruise Lines. Mid-1970s, FBI establishes a task force to clean the mob out of Las Vegas. 1975, Nevada gaming revenues first cracked the $1 billion mark. I guess the FBI was not all that successful. Howard Hughes dies in 1976. The Stardust is stripped of its license, supposedly the last mob-controlled casino. And well, I'm sorry, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it's a valuable list of things that are described in the text that I'm going to go back to now. Now, this one here is from EIR 1979, August 21st, 1979. So we'll be looking at it from the point of view of people 41 years ago, okay? 41 years ago, well, things were quite different. But this is the beginning of what we're looking at today. So let's see how much of this I can read through here. Next month, legislation to legalize casino gambling will be debated and voted on in 3 key northeastern state legislatures: New York, Pennsylvania, and Massachusetts. 2 of the 3 states' governors, Hugh Carey of New York and Richard Thornborough of Pennsylvania, have given their support to the measures, as has New York City Mayor Edward Koch. New York State is the flagship of the legalization drive. The owners of the major hotel chains, including the leading Las Vegas and Atlantic City enterprises, in most cases documented to be representatives of Eastern establishment and Zionist lobby financial interests and organized crime, have confirmed that they are ready to, quote, jump in with 12 to 14 new casino hotels in Manhattan alone. That legalized gambling is suddenly sprouting up everywhere is no coincidence. As the credentials of its proponents prove, the drive to blanket the Northeast with casinos is central to an attempt by a cabal of London and New York-based real estate speculators and international drug traffickers to consolidate political control over the region. The goal is the systematic conversion of an already shrinking real production base into a British-style, quote, service economy. A temperate zone, Bahamas. See what I'm a temperate zone, Bahamas, in other words, a New York weather, Bahamas, where organized crime operations of the London, Zionist lobby, and Wall Street interests will have free reign. The more advanced Northeast game plan, if implemented, would, as certain Zionist realtors in the Midwest are already saying, be the green light for other regional gambling legalization schemes, particularly in the Great Lakes area. While proponents of legal gambling claim that they seek to remove the profits of gambling from the control of organized crime and to divert them into the coffers of state government where they can be used to aid widows and orphans, this argument is a demonstrable fraud. The head of Governor Kerry's gambling advisory panel, Vincent Reed, has gone on record as saying that there will be no investigation of organized crime's tie-ins to the casinos. Rather, he states investigative efforts will concentrate on busting up what remains of old-line labor and ethnic-based political machines. Planned shrinkage. Casino gambling and economic depression are two sides of the same policy. Isn't that something to just contemplate? Casino gambling and depression are two sides of the same policy. And the political henchmen for British Zionist financial interests have openly said as much. Immediately after the release of the study by Kerry's advisory panel recommending the passage of a gambling law, New York City Deputy Mayor Robert F. Wagner, Jr. gave a widely covered radio and television interview stating that 1. New York City's productive base and population will decline substantially under a policy labeled shrinkage by Koch and Wagner. 2. Such shrinkage is to quote Wagner, desirable. And 3, to quote Wagner again, with shrinkage, casino, gambling, and related ventures are needed to provide a large revenue source to maintain the tax base. So this is another speed bump for me because I have to stop and make this point. What we're seeing is the real economy is going away. It's disappearing, like Main Street is disappearing. Well, it's not just Main Street anymore. It's all small businesses are disappearing under the Great Reset, right? But there still has to be a tax base. So gambling comes in and says, "Well, hey, I'll pay you a cut." And here comes National Harbor. A green light is being extended to organized crime interests to manage the operation, which in New York is projected to generate $3 billion annually in gambling profits. 75% going directly to casino operators. Kerry advisor Reed has declared that the New York casinos will be run by such corporations as Resorts International, Caesars World, and Hilton International. Resorts, as the book Dope Inc. documents, is run by the Meyer-Lansky organized crime family. Financial interests involved with Resorts in its Atlantic City venture include the leading Chicago Zionist family, the Pritzkers, parentheses owners of the Hyatt hotel chain, and the Bank of Nova Scotia, the North American and offshore banking department of British intelligence. Caesars World, owners of the Las Vegas Caesars Palace, is on record as being run by what is described as organized crime. Hilton International, the quote respectable firm in the trio, is the operator of the largest gaming hotel in Las Vegas. But more importantly, as the curriculum vitae of Baron Hilton demonstrates, the chain is and has been since World War II an arm of Britain's Special Operations Executive and the quote Intrepid network set up by Sir William Stevenson. Isn't that breathtaking? This is what I love about the EIRs, because that's just one little paragraph. And if you didn't know all that, or even if you did, and suddenly it's all put together, I really value this work. And I never really knew much about Hilton International, but to tie it directly to the Intrepid network set up by William Stevenson. Well, we've talked a lot about William Stevenson and his overwhelming influence on the OSS, as well, I think, as upon the FBI. Pardon me. Much about Hilton International. Okay, here comes some more names from the past that I recommend you, if you're not familiar with them, to take a minute and Google them. In a recent interview, Reed stated that there would be no investigation of mob links to the casino operators, and he candidly told another caller, "Sure, I know people from the mob. I grew up in mob territory. I knew many of them when I was a prosecutor. I've got connections to the mob," unquote. That's Reed, the assistant to Ed Koch. Instead, Reed indicated New York's gambling investigations will be used as the pretext for a series of Watergating probes of local political machines and labor unions under the direction of Manhattan District Attorney Robert Morgenthau. Morgenthau, a former U.S. attorney, is the son of the former Secretary of the Treasury, Henry Morgenthau, author of the infamous Morgenthau Plan for Germany. The Morgenthau Plan was the planned shrinkage blueprint of its time. It called for the total elimination of industry in Germany. A remarkable harbinger of the current Koch Robert Morgenthau planned shrinkage policy for New York City, and by extension for the Northeast as a whole. The financier interests behind Morgenthau and his dirty tricks machine are discernible from his pedigree. His grandmother was the niece of Zionist financier Herbert Lehman, of the Lehman Brothers Investment Bank portion of the Zionist, quote, "our crowd" financiers, including the Warburgs, Rothschilds, Schiffs, et al. The scope of the Morgenthau machine can be grasped from a thumbnail sketch of Morgenthau's protégés, both from his days as a U.S. Attorney and Manhattan District Attorney. They include Franklin Thomas, successor to former National Security Council Director McGeorge Bundy, as president of the Ford Foundation, who has had a long-time role in directing union busting and ghetto counterinsurgency operations. And Paul Curran, the special prosecutor appointed to the ongoing investigation into the Carter family peanut warehouse business. The burgeoning scandals at the CFR may use to bring down lame duck President Carter in the penultimate phase of launching its Alexander Haig option. Currently, one of Morgenthau's assistants is none other than young Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who is being groomed to replicate his father's role in the McCarthy witch hunt and in running the Justice Department for a vendetta against the Teamsters and building trades unions, as well as against non-British controlled business enterprises. The roster of gambling proponents nationally is heavily weighted with similar political specimens. They include media wunderkind David Garth, who orchestrated the election campaigns of a number of pro-gambling public officials, including New Jersey Governor Brendan Byrne, that's Byrne. Not sure if that means anything or not. Boston mayoral candidate Joseph Timilty, a Kennedy machine fixture. Pennsylvania Governor Richard Thornborough, who entered politics after a long career at the Justice Department, and Thornborough's one-time boss, former Attorney General Edward Levi in Illinois. Through such figures, gambling will be eminently a political weapon on behalf of British interests in the United States. In New Jersey, Resorts International reportedly spent $10 million buying state legislators and other politicians for Bronfman protege Brendan Byrne. That pattern will be repeated in the gambling mobilization as the gambling mobilization spreads nationally. That article by Constantine George, August 27th, 1979, in Executive Intelligence Review. Well, we're going to go now, almost 20 years later, to 1997 for a volume, and I'll show you this volume so you can see what it looks like. If you go to larouchepub.com, you'll be able to use their index and look up just about anything you want. So I'm going to go down to the bottom here and select the spread of legal gambling. And this is the story that I wanted really to get across today. So let me enlarge this so I can see it better, and we'll dig into this article. The spread of legal gambling. The transformation of the mob from the Al Capone-style era of violent gangsters into the more discreet modern corporate structure was an inside-outside job involving international bankers, government intelligence, and police agencies, and inside the mob, Meyer Lansky, the so-called chairman of the board of organized crime. While organized crime had always existed in the United States, it was Prohibition, the 1919 to 1931 British-spawned social engineering project that created the gangster era. The outlawing of liquor via the Volstead Act led to the rapid formation of liquor smuggling and distribution gangs, which obtained most of their liquor from Canada, and the Bronfman Gang, which had been built up during Canada's Prohibition. Through this liquor trade, all of which owed their fortunes to the British Empire's liquor cartel. During Prohibition, these British-controlled gangs made enormous amounts of money, funds which would later be used to build both the Hollywood movie business and Las Vegas. Gambling was legalized in Nevada in 1931, the year Prohibition ended. With the end of Prohibition, the upper echelons of the liquor gangs began the long process of transforming themselves into legitimate businesses. The Bronfman Gang and its Seagram Chicken Cock Whiskey, for example, transformed itself into the reputable Seagrams, the largest liquor company in North America. The Bronfmans, in addition to making their own whiskey for the masses, were also a distributor for British whiskey companies, including Distillery Company of London, which controlled more than half the world's market for Scotch. Behind the Bronfman frontmen stood the Lords of Britain. Meyer Lansky, on Her Majesty's service. Isn't that rich? In 1928, the Bronfmans and their top U.S. assets met in Cleveland. Cleveland? Why Cleveland? I don't know. And formed the National Crime Syndicate to cartelize organized crime. The syndicate began planning for the post-Prohibition era, including the legitimizing of their illegal profits, putting an end to the public bloody displays of violence favored by the Italian mafiosi, and creating a structure to enforce the crime cartel's diktats. In this transition, Meyer Lansky would play a critical role. Lansky, who had risen to power by protecting the Bronfman's liquor shipments into the United States, ran both the financial and enforcement arms of the National Crime Syndicate, Lansky's Murder, Inc., Assassination Bureau, eliminated rivals, and helped keep the mobsters, especially the vendetta-happy Italian mafia, in line. Lansky was helped in this by the U.S. government, which systematically targeted his rivals. By the late 1950s, after the murder of rivals such as Albert Anastasia and the jailing and later deportation of Lucky Luciano, Lansky became the uncontested chairman of the board of the cartel, using violence when necessary, but also earning the loyalty of the mobsters through his financial acumen, which made them all rich. Lansky's specialty was laundering the illegal profits of the mob into so-called legitimate businesses. In the words of Lansky biographer Hank Messick, under Lansky, quote, the National Crime Syndicate as an organization would merge with the business world until one was indistinguishable from the other, unquote. And that is the theme that I want to convey this morning, is that the mob is not just people, that have hidden assets that everything's off the books anymore, that this is all part of our economy in a very, very deep way. As part of his laundering operations, Lansky ran the lucrative gambling division of the syndicate. He ran a string of illegal casinos in Florida. He ran the casinos in Batista's Havana, and he ran the Las Vegas casinos. Lansky did not personally own all the casinos, but he controlled the men who did, and he controlled the money flows. The monies skimmed from the syndicate's casinos were passed to Lansky for laundering and for distribution to syndicate partners, minus the syndicate's and Lansky's cuts. Casino operators who tried to buck Lansky quickly learned the error of their ways. The British sponsorship of Lansky and the National Crime Syndicate was shown in 1959 when Fidel Castro replaced Batista in Cuba and shut down the casinos. Lansky relocated his Cuban operation to the British colony of the Bahamas, where he was assisted by Sir Stafford Sands and the Bay Street Boys. That Lansky could not have moved into a British colony without, this is in parentheses, that Lansky could not have moved into a British colony without sponsorship from the Empire should be obvious to anyone familiar with how the Empire operates, close parentheses. The result was that the Mary Carter Paint Company, renamed Resorts International in 1968, became the leading casino in the Bahamas. Resorts was plugged directly into the Rothschilds' international financial apparatus. Its creation was largely financed by the notorious Banque de Crédit International of Tibor Rosenbaum and Major that's the BCCI, in other words, and Major Mortimer Lewis Bloomfield, and the Hot Money International Overseas Services Network, nominally run by Bernie Cornfield and later by cocaine kingpin Robert Vesco. Bloomfield was a top British intelligence agent who headed both Perm-Index, the British Intelligence Front which assassinated President John F. Kennedy, and the FBI's Division 5 Counterintelligence Section, which, quote, investigated, unquote, the Kennedy assassination. Well, anybody that's interested in, what George and I have been talking about, the possible investigation of Oswald by Macduff, well, here it is. The Division 5 counterintelligence, which was, quote, investigated. Well, my dad was part of Division 5. So, George, here's another reference that supports what you're saying. Also, when he says, the author here says that Bloomfield headed Perm-Index and the FBI's Division 5. That's what he says. So I'd have to do some research if it's possible to try to verify that. But anyway, there it is, 1997 article, September 5th in EIR on page 20. So, interesting. Resorts intelligence links were further demonstrated by its creation of an anti-mob private security company named Intertel, loaded with, quote, former American and British intelligence and law enforcement officials. In 1966, Lansky's transformation to corporate casinos took a major step forward when Howard Hughes moved into Las Vegas. By this point, Hughes's corporate empire was dominated by the intelligence community, which was working with Lansky, and, according to some, of which Lansky was an associate. The Hughes move into Las Vegas was orchestrated by Robert Mayhew, a longtime FBI CIA agent. It was Mayhew who negotiated Hughes's purchase of Desert Inn from Cleveland mobster and National Crime Syndicate officer Mo Dalitz. Hughes, already a recluse, moved into the Desert Inn and became the mystery man of Las Vegas. In 1967, the state of Nevada changed the law to allow corporations to own multiple casinos, and eventually Hughes would own 7. In 1970, as Hughes continued to deteriorate, he was spirited out of the country by Intertel and moved to Resorts International Complex in Paradise Island, the Bahamas, outside the reach of U.S. law. The modern era of giant public gambling corporations began in the 1970s with the creation of the Drexel Burnham Lambert junk bond machine, which pumped hundreds of millions of dollars into the casino companies. Much has been written on the subject of Drexel, most of it disinformation attempted to portray Drexel as a one-man show, that man being Michael Milliken, or Milken. But the names on the door, Drexel, Burnham, and Lambert, tell a different story. The Drexel came from a company once known as Drexel Morgan and Company, as in J.P. Morgan, the most Anglophile commercial bank on Wall Street. The Burnham comes from Burnham and Company, founded in 1835 by I.W. Burnham II, the grandson of the founder of I.W. Harper Gin. And the Lamberts are Belgian cousins of the Rothschilds. The Milken machine was actually controlled by the Rothschilds and the Morgans as a vehicle for using dope money to seize and loot corporate America while building up their entertainment empire. The so-called Milken monsters were actually what could be called the sons of Meyer Lansky: Meshulem Riklis, Carl Lindner, Victor Posner, et al., and it was their money that made Milken, not the other way around. Pardon me a second. The result of this transition was the realization of Lansky's goal. Today, organized crime has transformed itself into, and indeed taken over, large parts of the business world. Organized crime, Las Vegas, and Hollywood. That Las Vegas was the company town of organized crime is well known thanks to countless movies, television shows, and novels. What is not so well known is Las Vegas's sister city relationship with Hollywood. The Hollywood movie business was created by the oligarchy as a tool to brainwash the American population. Isn't that nice? Well, it was just created as a tool to brainwash us. That's all. It's nice. One of the first Hollywood blockbusters, Birth of a Nation, was a shameless propaganda piece for the British organized Ku Klux Klan, designed to foster racism. Hollywood has also indoctrinated the population with visions of a hopeless future, of science as the enemy of mankind, and glamorized the sleazy underworld of drugs, sex, and casinos. In effect, one big commercial for Dope Inc. While the oligarchy's psychological warriors dictated the content of the Hollywood productions, the daily operation of the film business was delegated to the mob through their control over money flows and the newly formed Hollywood labor unions. One of the powers behind the scenes in both Las Vegas and Hollywood was Sidney Korshak, the consigliere of the Chicago mob, who oversaw many of the mob's business activities in the region. As such, Korshak was a consultant for a large number of corporations in the entertainment and liquor sectors, including MCA, Gulf and Western, Hilton, Hyatt, and Shenley. Korshak was also available to take care of special problems, including representing Benjamin Bugsy Siegel, the assassin and longtime lieutenant of Meyer Lansky, when Siegel was questioned in a murder investigation in 1940. Siegel opened the Flamingo Casino outside Las Vegas in 1946, an event which marked the beginning of the development of the Las Vegas Strip as an addition to the existing casinos in downtown Las Vegas. While Siegel would later be assassinated, the Flamingo lived on, today as a Hilton hotel and casino. Other casinos followed on the Strip. Lansky, former Detroit Purple Gang member and Cleveland mobster Mo Dalitz, and others built the Riviera, the Stardust, and the Desert Inn, among others. When Kirk Kerkorian built the MGM Grand on land purchased from Dalitz, Korshak helped arrange the financing, with help from MCA and Gulf and Western. When Kerkorian sold his Las Vegas interests, parentheses he has since returned, it was to Korshak client Hilton, which had its own connections to the Lansky machine. The arrival of Howard Hughes in Las Vegas was seen by many as the point at which the gaming business began to enter the corporate mainstream. Within a year of his arrival, Hughes had bought 3 casino properties which reputedly had been owned by organized crime. In the late 1970s, Hughes' tool, later Summa Corporation, was the biggest gambling corporation in Nevada, owning 7 casinos, including the Frontier, the Landmark, the Silver Slipper, the Sands, and the Desert Inn. This shift to corporate gambling was aided not only by the state of Nevada, which changed its law in 1967 to allow corporations to own multiple casinos, but also by the federal government, which in the mid-1970s sent an FBI organized crime task force to Vegas to take down the remnants of the old-style mob operations and complete the purge. That task force was headed by FBI organized crime specialist Emmett Michaels, who later resigned to join Hughes' Summa Corporation and went on to become head of security for Circus Circus. In 1977, the Stardust, allegedly the last mob-controlled hotel, was stripped of its license, and by the mid-1980s, the FBI had obtained convictions against mobsters in Chicago, Kansas City, and Milwaukee, ending the violent, quote, Mustache Pete era in Las Vegas. By 1993, according to the FBI, there was no sign of the mob in Vegas. We are not aware of any organized crime involvement in the Nevada gaming industry, quote unquote. Federal Special Agent, FBI Special Agent Burke Smith of the agency's Las Vegas Bureau claimed in March of that year, 1993. The second wave of corporate gambling, as noted above, began with the Rothschilds' Drexel Burnham Lambert junk bond machine. Drexel raised the funds for Steve Wynn to open the Golden Nugget in Atlantic City in 1980 and helped launch that firm, today called Mirage Resorts, into one of the giants of the gambling business. Wynn, now a very rich man, is a big funder of the Anti-Defamation League, the propaganda machine which provided cover for Lansky and a national crime syndicate by branding anyone who threatened Lansky an anti-Semite. Drexel also raised funds for a number of other gambling companies, including the Riviera, Bally's, and Ramada, today known as Aztar. In 1983, Drexel raised the funds to take Circus Circus Enterprises, another of today's giants, public. As part of the deal, Drexel installed Glenn Schaefer at Circus Circus as a liaison between the casino company and the financial markets. More Wall Street's man in Vegas than Vegas's man on Wall Street, Schaefer knew the business. He had previously worked for investment bank Dean Witter, for public relations firm Hill and Knowlton, where he handled the Caesars World account, and Ramada, which owned the Tropicana casinos in Vegas and Atlantic City. The new Circus Circus was a success, and Schaefer was rewarded by being on the cover of Institutional Investor as one of corporate America's outstanding financiers. Well, we're coming up to the top of the hour. There is much more in this article and this particular issue in general, but here's what I wanted to close with is just my thoughts, okay? I've been advised to look right in the camera when I give you my summation. So here's my summation to the jury. It's both ends against the middle. You know, we've spent many, many shows talking about how the British elite, the oligarchs, and the old families of New England that are married and cousins and interrelated and always very, very much ready to associate themselves with the upper class of England. And Wall Street, Boston, you know, that WASP mentality, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, is the upper class, which oppresses us from the top. But now I want to bring into our thinking the oppression that the British-driven dope business, British East India Company, Freemasonry, the whole skull and bones, all of that is oppressing us from the bottom, from below the surface, like demons rising up through the soil and demons pressing down from above and squeezing us who just want to have an honest America to live out our lives in and have participation in the republic that has been created here. But it's not just the intelligence agency related pressure that's coming upon us. It's also the illegal, the dope money. And it's interesting, the story of Don Calogero, when who was it, asked Montini, as I related the other night, asked Montini, who's in the papal curia in Rome, who could we use to help us fight against Mussolini? And the answer was to get Don Calogero out of jail, because Mussolini had locked him up. Because Mussolini was cleaning up the mafia. He had got rid of the mafia, basically, and that was one of the things the Italian people were grateful for. But now you see that's where the conflict is between the people that have control over our institutions, such as the intelligence agencies and the big banks, and the people who, because of their race or their country of origin or their color of their skin, or just because of the inherent prejudice of the people that have the money, have created an underground economy. I don't blame them for that. If there's no way for you to make an honest living, but you want to make a living, what are you going to do? And I suppose I'm saying, if I had to choose between the totalitarian technological nightmare that's being imposed upon us, and the society of honorable men, the society of honorable men, you at least know what the rules are. So let's look at everything. Let's not leave anybody out when we're looking for what the solution is. I think the solution is it's got to be amnesty. There's got to be an amnesty for everybody and return to our values. I know you want to lock them up, and I understand that, but what's more important right now is to maintain the unity of this country. Don't let them take us down. So that's my contribution this morning. I'll be back tonight with the trio, George and Professor.